As many of you who follow me on Facebook recognize, last week I got to spend the week with 4 of my 5 granddaughters, including the twins. The twins are now 8 months old, and they're at that fascinating age where their personalities are starting to develop, their mannerisms, their behaviors. And while they are identical, they're very different. You can see it, you can experience it. You can sit there and go, wow, look at that. I've seen that before. In their mother or their father. Or is it grandma or grandpa? Or maybe great-grandmother or grandpa. But they've got those eyes. Ooh, that look was just like their big sister. Oh, I remember when their uncle used to crawl backwards like that. And on and on and on went the observations. The fascinating thing about human life is that it's never just about one body, but it involves an interplay, at least with two. And as I've been discovering over the last few years, much more than that, as we look back over the generations and watch the gene patterns continue to unfold in new and exciting ways. That's an important piece to remember as we approach St. Paul's body language, as he lays it out in his letter to the Corinthians and later in his letter to the Romans, where he talks about the church as the body of Christ. And he uses body language to describe how it works together. One body with many parts. And particularly in Corinthians, he spells out how important each and every part of that body is to the total functioning of the body. And any of us who have ever encountered an injury or illness to a particular part of our body know exactly what Paul's talking about. But oftentimes, we read these passages in an exclusive way. We think that Paul is simply talking about the church in isolation as the body and many parts. If we do that, we've limited, I believe, Paul's understanding of the body. Because if we follow the history of Christianity, it is when the body is willing to encounter other bodies that it thrives. When it bumps into other cultures, other worlds, and is able to wed itself to customs and rituals and engage that other world in creative dialogue. It is when the church is at its best. It's when the church is growing, thriving, reforming. How do we as church encounter the world in which we live? And not simply think of ourselves as an exclusive body. That's particularly important these days, because we're living in a world where almost everybody wants to think exclusively. We tend to want to surround ourselves with bodies like ours, people that think and look and behave like us, that hold the same values, the same ideas, and to cut the rest of the world out. If we do that, I think it's pretty clear we're going to die. And so how do we as church engage the world in which we live in a healthy manner? How do we be that body in the midst of the body of the world. How do we engage it? How do we explore it? How are we challenged by it? How do we use what we see to bring forth new life and new growth? It's a great challenge and not an easy one. But we're not in this alone. It's not an accident that when Jesus talks about death and resurrection, he uses the image of the seed that's planted in the ground, in the world, that it may bring forth new life. For unless the seed dies, it cannot grow. It cannot have life. So how do we as church enter into the ground? I think one of the images that we can take from the Gospels and from Paul himself is that the word that we've been given, the story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, is a story that brings forth life, that transforms, that brings healing, wholeness. It's not an accident that when Jesus heals somebody, he sends them back into the world. Or when he sends the disciples to preach the good news, he sends them out into the world. How will we engage the world in which we live with the good news of Jesus Christ? Stay tuned. There's more coming. That is the promise. As the grain of wheat lies scattered on the hills, were gathered into one to become one bread, so may all your people from all the ends of earth be gathered into one in you. As this cup of blessing is shared within our midst, may we share your presence and your love. As the grains of wheat once scattered on the hill were gathered into one to become one bread, so may all your people from all the ends of earth be gathered into one in you. Let this be a foretaste of all that is to come, when all creation shares this feast with you. As the grains of wheat once scattered on the hill were gathered into one to become one bread, so may all your people in all the ends of earth be gathered into one in you.